You know what's one of the most confusing and painful experiences someone can go through? It's realizing that someone who once held you close, who once looked at you like you were their world, has gone completely silent. Desire isn't enough. Action requires permission or urgency. This truth explains so much of the emotional confusion we experience when someone we care about pulls away. When we're in pain from someone's silence, we tend to assume that if they missed us, they would say something. If they wanted us, they'd reach out. If they still had feelings, they'd show them. It seems logical, but the truth is, emotion doesn't always equal motion. Craving someone and actually doing something about that craving are completely different forces, and one doesn't always lead to the other. You can be intensely missed and still never hear from the person who misses you. A man can lie awake at night, thinking about the curve of your voice, the way you laughed in moments that mattered, the softness in your eyes when you looked at him, and still not send a single text. Why? Because desire may create internal longing, but it doesn't automatically create external movement. For action to happen, two key things usually need to be present: permission or urgency. Without one of those, even the deepest longing can stay stuck inside a person who looks from the outside like they don't care. Permission comes in many forms. Sometimes it's emotional. A man may not reach out because he feels that the door is closed, even if you haven't slammed it shut yourself. He senses you've grown, moved on, or healed beyond needing him, and that perception convinces him there's no welcome mat left outside your heart. Other times, the lack of permission is internal. His ego won't let him admit he still wants you. His pride whispers that he'll look weak. His mind replays all the mistakes he made and tells him he doesn't deserve a second chance. So even as the memories of you bring a lump to his throat, his fear of rejection is louder than his craving. He may convince himself you wouldn't want to hear from him anyway, so why bother? Then there's urgency. This is often the difference between a thought and a move. People don't always act until something shakes them. Maybe you post a photo with someone else and he panics. Maybe he hears a mutual friend say you've changed your number. Maybe a life event, an illness, a loss, a birthday makes him realize how much time has passed. In those moments, the craving breaks through his resistance because the cost of silence suddenly feels higher than the fear of reaching out. Urgency doesn't always come naturally. Sometimes people wait so long, they forget what action even looks like. They become numb, they become used to the absence, even if it hurts. They drown in nostalgia but still stay quiet. This is why you can feel so much energy between two people and still experience complete distance. The connection is there, the longing is there, but the action never arrives, because the internal green light never turns on. It's not that he doesn't think of you, it's that he doesn't give himself the permission to act on it. Or life hasn't handed him the moment that makes him feel he must. So he settles into the passive ache of what could have been. He lives inside the craving instead of using it to move toward you. He plays it safe not because he doesn't care, but because he's convinced caring in silence is easier than risking the pain of reaching out. This is how people who still love each other drift apart, not through lack of emotion, but through lack of motion. His silence often comes from pride, fear, or shame. When someone goes quiet after a deep connection, we often assume the worst, that they stopped caring, that their feelings weren't real, that we were somehow easy to forget. But many times, the silence isn't about a lack of emotion. It's about an overload of emotions they don't know how to handle. Silence, in many cases, is not the absence of feeling, but the inability to process what they feel in a way that leads to vulnerability. Pride, fear, and shame are powerful emotional roadblocks, and when they are in control, they can keep someone emotionally paralyzed. Pride is often the first wall. It whispers to him that reaching out would make him look weak, desperate, or like he's lost control. It tells him that if he shows you he misses you, you'll have the upper hand. Pride convinces him that it's better to act unaffected, even if inside he's a mess. And especially if the breakup or the distance was caused by his own actions, pride won't let him take accountability so easily. It becomes a defense mechanism, protecting his image at the expense of the connection. He might want to speak, but pride reminds him that the last word wasn't his, or that apologizing would be admitting he was wrong. So instead of texting you in the quiet moments, he tells himself to stay strong, to wait it out, to pretend you never mattered as much as you did. Then comes fear, which is often tied so tightly to pride it's hard to see the difference. Fear tells him all the ways reaching out could go wrong. What if you ignore him? What if you lash out? What if you've already moved on, and his message would only confirm that he lost something valuable? Fear creates imagined conversations in his head, ones where he ends up embarrassed, hurt, or exposed. It also reminds him of how vulnerable he felt when he was close to you, how raw the connection made him, how open he had to be to share those parts of himself. So he chooses to protect himself. He shuts the door and tells himself it's safer this way. Fear makes it easier to avoid than to engage. It makes the pain of silence feel less risky than the possible pain of rejection. But shame is the most silent of them all. Shame is different from guilt. Guilt says, I did something bad. Shame says, I am bad. And when someone is carrying shame, they often believe they are no longer worthy of the love they lost. If he feels he let you down, hurt you, betrayed you, or simply didn't show up the way he should have, shame becomes a heavy fog around him. It whispers that you're better off without him, that he blew his chance, that you won't ever see him the same again. Shame isolates. It tells him that even if he wants to fix things, he doesn't have the right to, and so he disappears, not because he's cold, but because he feels unworthy of another opportunity. These three emotions often swirl together, each reinforcing the others. Pride keeps him from admitting he's hurting. Fear keeps him from reaching out and risking more pain. Shame keeps him believing he no longer deserves a place in your life. And so, even as he remembers your touch, even as he replays your conversations in his head, even as he wonders what you're doing, and if you think about him too, he says nothing. He convinces himself it's better this way. He tries to bury what he feels because facing it would mean confronting not just you, but himself. And for many people, that's the scariest conversation of all. Craving you doesn't mean he believes he deserves you. One of the most misunderstood aspects of love and loss is the assumption that desire always leads to action. That if someone wants you, they'll fight for you, that missing you automatically translates into reaching for you. But there's a hidden layer that often stops a man from acting on his emotions, even when those emotions are deep and undeniable. That layer is self-worth. A man can crave your presence, dream of your voice, and feel the emptiness of your absence every day, yet still convince himself that you're better off without him. That what you had was real, but he is no longer worthy of having it again. That no matter how much he wants you, his mistakes, flaws, or past choices have disqualified him from ever being welcomed back into your life. This belief doesn't come from a lack of emotion. It often comes from too much of it. When a man reflects on a relationship and realizes how he failed to meet your needs, how he hurt you, neglected you, or took you for granted, He may carry that realization like a weight around his neck. Every time he thinks of you, he doesn't just feel desire, he feels the sting of regret. And regret can be paralyzing. Instead of saying, "I miss her, let me reach out," he says, "I miss her, but I don't deserve her anymore." That quiet self-judgment begins to take root, and over time, it becomes a story he tells himself over and over. A story where he is the villain, and you are the heroine who escaped him. In that story, he doesn't get to be the one who comes back. He gets to watch from a distance and silently wish things had been different. Sometimes, this sense of unworthiness is rooted in things far deeper than the relationship itself. It may come from childhood wounds, past failures, or beliefs he's carried for years about not being good enough. When those beliefs surface during or after a breakup, they get projected onto you. He might believe you're too good, too stable, too emotionally evolved for him. He might see the way you carry yourself, how you've healed, how you've kept your dignity, and compare it to his own emotional chaos. That comparison creates a gap, and in that gap, he feels he doesn't measure up. So he stays away, not because he doesn't feel the pull toward you, but because he thinks answering that pull would be selfish, unfair, or even cruel if he's not fully healed. Even if he imagines reaching out, that internal voice of unworthiness stops him at the edge. He might type a message and delete it. He might watch your stories and think of calling, but put the phone down again. He might replay your laughter in his head and feel the ache of wanting you close, only to remind himself that wanting you isn't enough. He needs to be ready, he needs to be whole, and he tells himself he isn't either. So instead of fighting for the second chance, he gives it up before even asking for it. He lives with the craving, but chooses not to act on it because deep down, he believes he has lost the right. What makes this even harder is that from the outside, it can look like he doesn't care, like he's moved on, unaffected, disconnected. But inside, there's a storm, a deep emotional conflict between the desire to be near you and the belief that he shouldn't be. That contrast is what keeps him in silence. He convinces himself that staying away is the noble thing, the right thing, the safe thing, not because you don't matter, but because he believes someone like you shouldn't have to settle for someone like him again. He delays contact until it's too late, paralyzed by overthinking. When someone walks away from a connection that still means something to them, they don't always slam the door shut. Sometimes they leave it cracked open, just enough to make themselves believe that maybe one day they'll come back through it. But instead of acting on that possibility, they linger in the space between thought and action, between intention and follow through. The days pass, and with every moment that goes by, they feel less certain about what to say, how to say it, or whether it would even matter anymore. That internal hesitation builds, and what started as a temporary pause becomes a long silence they don't know how to break. Overthinking becomes the cage. He might replay every moment of your last conversation, analyzing how it ended, what tone you used, whether your words were final or if there was hidden softness in them. He wonders if reaching out now would be met with indifference or worse, rejection. That uncertainty eats at him. So, instead of taking a step forward, he sits with his thoughts, waiting for the perfect time, the perfect words, the perfect moment. But perfection never arrives. The longer he waits, the harder it becomes to justify reaching out, because now he not only has to break the silence, he has to explain it. Every day that passes adds another layer of emotional resistance. He tells himself he'll reach out tomorrow, or next week, or when he's in a better place. He believes the right moment will show up eventually, but deep down, he's just postponing the discomfort. And the irony is The more he avoids the discomfort, the bigger it grows. What might have been a simple "Hey, I've been thinking about you" message now feels like it needs a grand explanation. He begins to imagine all the ways you'll respond, and most of those imagined responses are negative. He fears you'll be cold, angry, or completely indifferent. He fears hearing nothing at all, so he talks himself out of it again and again. Meanwhile, life continues on your side of the story. You grow, heal, maybe even move forward in new directions. And with each sign that you're doing fine without him, he feels more conflicted. On one hand, he's happy to see you thriving. On the other, it makes him feel even more disconnected. It reinforces the belief that reaching out would be intrusive or unwelcome. So he pulls back further, still thinking about you, still checking your profile from time to time, still rehearsing conversations in his head that he never plans to have. And in doing so, he becomes a prisoner of his own indecision. It's not that he never intended to reach out. It's that the longer he waited, the more he believed it was too late. He starts to question whether his presence would be healing or hurtful, whether you even remember the version of him that was once close to you. And eventually, he convinces himself that silence has become the more respectful choice. But deep down, he still feels the weight of everything unsaid, the messages he wrote and deleted, the nights he stared at your name in his phone, the moments he almost called but let the screen go dark. He lives in the delay, hoping the right time will still show up one day, not realizing that the window is slowly closing. And by the time he gathers enough certainty to act, the space between you has changed. The silence has rewritten the relationship. The person he wants to reach might not be waiting anymore, or may not recognize him through the lens of so much absence. His lack of action reflects his emotional readiness, not your worth. It's one of the most painful things to grasp when someone you shared something meaningful with suddenly disappears or goes silent. The natural instinct is to internalize the rejection, to assume that if they don't reach out, if they don't chase after you, it must mean you weren't important enough, that you didn't leave a deep enough impression, that you were forgettable. But that belief is not only emotionally destructive, it's also completely inaccurate. People don't act based on how amazing someone is. They act based on how ready they are to meet that person where they're at. Readiness is everything when it comes to emotional investment. You can be everything someone says they want and still be left waiting for a message that never comes, not because you weren't enough, but because they're not prepared to show up for the version of love you require. Emotional readiness means having the capacity to be honest, to be vulnerable, to handle discomfort, to communicate clearly, to be consistent. It's not about having all the answers or being perfect, but about being willing to try, to lean in when things get hard, to face fear and still move forward. Many people crave love, but few are truly ready for the kind of love that demands accountability, depth, and emotional presence. So, when a man stays silent despite craving you, it's often because the kind of love he feels for you is bigger than what he knows how to handle. He might recognize your value and know that you're different from anyone he's had before. But that recognition doesn't mean he knows how to rise to the occasion. And if he feels unequipped, unprepared, or emotionally immature, the easiest thing for him to do is retreat. In his silence, he may be carrying admiration for you. He may respect your strength, your boundaries, your standards. But if he doesn't believe he can meet those standards, he won't try. That doesn't mean those standards are too high. It means he's not in a place where he can match them. That's a reflection of his growth, not your desirability. Often, people need time to face their own emotional blocks. Sometimes that journey takes years. And if someone hasn't done the work to understand themselves, to process their past, to heal their wounds, then no matter how much they feel for you, they'll still fall short when it comes to action. This is why two people can share something deep and still walk away with unfinished feelings, because love alone is never the full picture. Timing, maturity, and inner stability play massive roles in whether someone can act on their emotions. His inaction doesn't mean you didn't move him. It means he isn't ready to meet what that movement requires. You can stir someone's soul and still watch them stay still, and that stillness is not your failure to inspire. It's their inability to respond from a place of wholeness. It's easy to assume that if someone really wanted you, they'd do something about it. And yes, in a perfect world, that would be true. But the world is full of people who want things they don't feel ready for. People who feel deeply but act shallowly. People who know what's good for them but sabotage it anyway. That's not a reflection of your worth. It's a mirror of their struggle. When someone can't reach for you, it doesn't mean you were too much. It often means they were too little for the kind of connection you represented. The empty economy. The silence you're experiencing isn't empty. It's full of unspoken emotions, unresolved inner conflict, and a deep craving that's being held back by pride, fear, shame, unworthiness, and emotional unreadiness. His lack of contact is not a measure of how much you were loved, how deeply you were desired, or how unforgettable you are. It's a reflection of everything he hasn't yet dealt with within himself. He may desperately crave you, but without the courage, growth, and clarity to act on that craving, he'll stay frozen in the space between wanting and doing. And in that space, it's not your job to wait, to chase, or to question your worth, because true connection requires more than emotion. It requires action, presence, and readiness.